Sae'Von Springer is the owner and founder of Native Assets. Any views expressed by Sae'Von or his guest are their own thoughts and opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. Any guest appearance by representatives of Web3, NFT, crypto, or any other kind of organization does not constitute an endorsement by Native Assets or the guest's respective employer. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be mistaken as financial advice. Always conduct your own due diligence and consult a qualified professional when considering any investments of any kind. All right, y'all. So today, just know when I use the word OG, I mean it truly. I mean it genuinely, because today's guest, he currently is heading up, he's SVP of Strategy and Biz Dev at Spatial. But just so you have context, prior to that, he was leading a lot of the biz dev and product strategy at Samsung Next, which, if I am correct, is more of their incubator for innovation projects and that sort of thing. And then prior to that, he actually co-founded the AR VR lab at MIT, which also hosts a hackathon, which is the largest AR VR hackathon in the world. So when I say OG with all this metaverse shit, just know we're really looking at a real one right here. Jacob, welcome to the show. How you doing today, man?
Yeah, I wish I could live up to like 50% of that intro, but yes, that stuff is true. It's amazing to be here. Insanely excited to chat, and I just love this stuff. So I want to dig in. How you doing?
I'm blessed, man. I'm blessed, and I appreciate you making the time.
Love it.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm a little surprised that you didn't show up as one of the avatars, man.
Well, listen, I got to leave the people wanting more. And, this is my own subversive way of trying to show the limits of Zoom. This is like, I'm trying to lead with the limits to motivate people to enter the metaverse here. So next time we'll do it in Spatial and you'll get to see my dope avatar. Just for fun.
Hell yeah, man. So just for the people who may not know, if you could do like a brief 30-second overview of what Spatial is.
For sure. I mean, the simplest way I'd put it is we're like really like a metaverse or virtual social network. So the idea behind Spatial is if you are a 3D creator or an artist or maybe like a community organizer or a brand, and you want to have like a really deep, fun social experience with other people where you really feel like you're with them and can just have an insane amount of fun together. You build out a space or an event in Spatial and invite people in, and then you just boogie like that. That's what Spatial is all about. And so, we're used for things like hosting virtual NFT and art exhibitions, dance parties. A ton of people host like lectures and teach in Spatial, a lot of community meetups. So that's kind of like the core of what you generally see people doing in Spatial on a day-to-day basis. And we're super accessible. So our big thing is we want to blend beauty and accessibility. So we want to give you the dopest graphics, but also make sure that literally people that have no idea what they're doing can get in. So we work on web, we work on mobile, we work in VR. So the idea is just like one click you're in, and on any device, there should be no barrier. Anyone can get in.
So I was going to wait for us to get to that point, but that was one of the things that was most surprising, almost jarring to me when I first jumped on the platform sometime last year, was like, there's nothing you have to, literally, there's zero you have to download. You just hit a button and then you're in this joint. So from like really, you can take the question however you want, but how have you seen that particular differentiation play to you all's benefit?
For sure. I mean, I think it's like useful here to go backwards, like before going into the question, because the thing people don't realize this about Spatial, but like we're 6 years old. So like most of these most of the metaverse companies have been around for like at most a year. It became like a very popular thing to do last year. And we started, I mean, literally the history of Spatial is wild, right? So it's like our two founders are just dope designers. Anand sold his last company to Google. Jinhai used to be like the lead TV designer at Samsung. And Spatial just started off really with like an inquisitive mind to be like, what is VR and AR good for? Like, it's cool, but like, where is this actually useful where you can motivate people to strap a computer to their face? And we settled on collaboration. And so when Spatial first kind of entered its like limited alpha release, it was like 2018, We literally were only available on, super expensive augmented reality headsets. And so the only people that could afford them were like big ass companies. And there was like a thing that everyone would say back then is they would basically be like, yeah, but like big companies, they're not price sensitive. And yeah, in big companies, people are more motivated to try, they're more motivated to try new technology. So we kind of like played with that. But I think what we learned really quickly is just like human beings are human beings. And most of the time people don't, whether it's their money or their company's money, like they're not super into dropping like a ton of money on a headset. And if they're not using this device day in and day out, they're pretty lazy. Like they're not really that into switching to another device for an experience, right? So like if you think about your day to day, you basically just use like your laptop or PC or your phone because you do everything on those devices anyway. And like it's super hard to get you to do something in another device. And the only time people switch it up and maybe jump on another device is if it's a game console. And that's because they're about to have like an insanely fun, crazy experience that they're not going to have on, their phone.
And they've been around for decades, so people are
Right.
already used to like that's a form of entertainment, like a
They're used
television.
to it. They've cultivated that. Like they've organized their home around it, right? Like this is where I play my games. I have my TV set up. I have my comfy chair. Like there's a whole ritual that doesn't exist yet for putting on headsets. And so we kind of concluded this was like in 2020 going into 2021. We're like, right now, this is me being like totally honest, like the experience in a headset, unless you're playing a game, is just not dope enough to motivate most people to put on a headset. So we need to really meet people where they already are instead of insisting they meet us where we're at. And so that's where we decided, okay, like we really need to support web, we need to support mobile. And it wasn't easy because supporting multiple platforms. I mean, we use Unity, which is amazing, but like even with Unity, it's really not easy to support multiple platforms. But that was like, we basically just said we're willing to put in the blood, sweat, and tears to make this doable. And there's a lot we have to do on the back end in terms of like, we have all sorts of weird internal tech that we've built to enable us to like publish something in Unity and then be able to republish it across all these platforms. You have to figure out native design that makes sense for each platform because what makes sense in a web browser is not what's best for a user using an iPhone, which is certainly not what's best for someone using a Quest. So, I mean, I would say that like in a lot of ways, like we've probably made a bet that we think this is the single thing that matters most as a metaverse right now. Like I would argue that like different people, try and develop different competitive advantages. I would say like if you boiled spatial down to everything, like our competitive advantage that we're trying is we want this to be like really fun and beautiful, but also really accessible. And we've like everything's a trade-off. So there's time that we've invested on the Eng side to make things multi-platform that we could have spent doing other things. So for example, like we could have just gone web or just gone VR and maybe invested in some other features. But at the end of the day, I think we always felt that like if people can't get in, if this isn't easy to use, you could build all sorts of fun features and none of it matters.
It'll be Decentraland.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I really maybe I'm like maybe I'm stupid. Maybe I'm like a ham that like I really do believe in the WAGMI stuff. Like, so like we literally like had meetings where like Decentraland and Somnium, they've all rolled up. And like I gotta give credit where credit's due. Like Decentraland, Sandbox, like they've all been really, really good about having an open mind about like collaboration and doing this together. Cause like for me, it's like it's so early in all this stuff. It's like, like there are billions of people that use the internet and millions of people that use like the metaverse today, at least like as most people think about it, right? So we have so much work to do. So I think like our view is like we got to all do this together. So like does Decentraland do things that like we don't do? For sure. Like I mean, it's not a secret that we're not a big fan of like land sales, but like we kind of think there's room in this for a bunch of different approaches. Like I think if people really care about the DeFi aspect of it, and that's like if that's one of the things that attracts them to get into the metaverse to begin with, they should go to Decentraland because there's upside there. Like you can buy land and speculate on the value of the land. You can buy the token. For us, we like don't, that's not in our DNA, which is not a criticism. It's just that like we didn't hatch from an egg in the DeFi world. And so if we were gonna like issue land, like we would probably do it badly, in a token. Like we really need to like study that more to figure out how to do that in a way that's actually like useful to people. So for us, we said like, okay, like what do we know how to do well? All we really know how to do well is like product and community. Like everyone that works at Spatial basically has a background in building like really easy to use product for a lot of people or trying to cultivate community. So our big thing is just authenticity. Like a company should lean into like what they're naturally good at. And I think you see all the time if companies try and do stuff they're not good at, it's just like it feels ridiculous. So like the cool thing is we collab with Decentraland and like stuff we do actually like has this natural, there's like a natural synergy because it's like people that are really into Decentraland and they want to like get eyeballs on their plots of land, like they participate in Decentraland. And people that just want to like build with zero barriers and like, they're just creators and they want to just jump into Spatial and build, without having to commit anything from the get-go. They love doing it in Spatial, and we could build a portal between the two. So you can jump between the two. And like, I think this is all a very long-winded way of saying that like, we kind of like to let the users and the creators decide. And I think there was a really interesting interview. Maybe this was in like the Satya Mark Zuckerberg interview from the last couple of days in Stratechery. I'm not sure if this is from there, but I think there's been this like a trope, this like that every new thing that emerges is like a winner takes all kind of thing. But I think that's actually not been true. Like for even in Web 2, it's like in social, it's like, was it a winner take all for Facebook? Well, not really. Like
they took a lot, but they didn't take it all.
But like Snap came up and like TikTok came up and like Instagram didn't start within Facebook and WhatsApp didn't start within Facebook. So I think there's ample room for innovation in these spaces where it's not really like a winner take all. I think what there is just like a very natural competitive landscape where it's like you have to put the user first. And if you're not serving the user, or in this case, we think the creator, like they can just go somewhere else. And so that's what we think, that's actually a good dynamic because it keeps us honest. Like at the end of the day, like if Spatial is a shitty experience, like we just support open standards, right? Like you build in GLTF, you build in Unity. If it's a shitty experience, like our creators can just pick up and go to any other platform because we're not creating some proprietary standard. And we think that's really important. And we like that because that keeps us honest. And so the only thing we preach to any other platform is like support open standards. Because if you do that, at least it keeps people honest. Where if, they're not getting what they need from you, they can take it somewhere else. And we think that like putting creators first, letting them own what they're building and letting them build on standards that are open. So if we let them down, they can go somewhere else. Like we think that is the most friendly landscape for creators and users, period. Does that make sense?
No, 1,000%. And you're actually making my job quite easy because there were several questions that I had planned that you kind of just rolled through. So I'd like those moments I just get to sit back and be like, all right, yeah. So the thing that jumped out to me, aside from the ease of getting into the experience in and of itself, is that it does feel very focused in it being something that is optimized really for interaction and communal spaces. Whereas I think that right now, particularly given kind of the precedent or what people think that they might be expecting from something like Other Side, a lot of it has become gamified of like, oh, jump in this metaverse and it's going to be a game and we're going to have all these different things you can do in it that can detract from just like the, hey, jump in a shared space and be able to interact and engage with each other. And that brings to mind a couple of different things that are happening in parallel in this space, right? We see that there are some people building with an openness in mind, as you mentioned, of like, hey, let's build on the most logical standards from a tech back-end side, but also let's try to make it as open as possible. Let's not put up too many pay barriers to get in. It's like somebody wants to jump another side. One, they can't do shit right now. Two, they got to drop several $1,000s to get a piece of land, and we don't know what that's going to look like for anyone who's not a landholder, all of that, which then can also raise warning flags for people like the SEC to come in and be like, all right, all the financialization happening here was really good with it. But I'm curious, when you all look at what Microsoft or well, Microsoft as well, but Meta, what they're trying to do with their, I think it's called Horizon Worlds or something like that.
Yeah.
And I haven't jumped in any betas or demos. I've only seen photos and it looked kind of janky. And so I'm curious, was there like a moment where maybe either Meta came to you all and was like, yo, so we're in a pinch and we need something that works? What y'all think about an acquisition? Or do you look at that and think to yourself like, the way that they're doing it, this is really like a tailwind for us because of some of the mistakes or some of the closeness or some of the just approach in general that they have versus what you all are doing, and knowing that y'all have been doing this and been working on this since 2016. And I'm not sure when Meta really got serious about the whole metaverse thing.
Right. So I think there are a couple of things there. So like on the acquisition stuff, and this will be a little bit of an eye roll answer, but like, have companies approached us to buy us? Like, yes, sure. I mean, it's not like surprising. We've been around for 6 years, but we're pretty mission driven, and so our view has always been like, we'll do whatever it takes to put us in position to build what we think is right. And so if that's like being a startup, we'll stay a startup. If that's getting acquired, it's getting acquired. And so you could like read into that as you want to, but I'll say that like, I think that's how we've approached those kind of conversations in the past. Meta, we've actually had like a good history of partnership with, and it started on the like productivity enterprise side. So like we worked pretty closely with Meta when we were focused more on productivity and enterprise stuff. And it's actually funny because the timing is really interesting. Like in January of 2021, so we worked closely with Meta. We brought Spatial to the Meta Quest store in 2020. They were super supportive. So I only have the nicest things to say about Meta in that sense, from like supporting us and bringing us to the Quest. I think that so in 2021, like early 20, I'm trying to like remember the timeline. So at Oculus Connect last year, I feel like, which is now Meta Connect, or maybe it was Meta Connect back then, but like they started to talk about like Horizon Workrooms, which was their productivity product. But earlier in 2021, so in like January of 2021, February, we had started to see a couple of artists come into Spatial and start using us in ways we didn't expect. So like it was this really amazing artist, Alex, Federico, a really amazing sculpture artist. They were some of the first that came in and built like exhibitions and studios when we were literally still just marketing ourselves as like meetings. And it was getting around maybe like March, April, when we started to see like a ton of NFT creators doing stuff in Spatial, despite the fact that we had like no on-ramp for people that were using the blockchain to bring their stuff into Spatial. And the room templates that we had weren't even like galleries. They were like conference rooms and stuff, but they were beautiful. So people were like, okay, I could make this work. And so in Q2 of 2021, we said like, okay, like let's go out on a limb and support more of this creator use case for 1 3-month sprint. Like, let's see how it goes. And if we see that this is positive and there's like really interesting connection here, maybe we should just like focus on this full time. And so we did that, and the usage bump was pretty huge. Like we started getting a ton of creators jumping into Spatial. We were like, like maybe there's something here. And then in that summer, we closed a growth round that was like 25 million. That was like totally behind this new direction. And then I think we formally announced our pivot sometime in like the fall of 2021, which was right around the time of Connect when they showed Workrooms. And so I think like we got a lot of questions back then because people were like, oh, did you pivot because of Workrooms? Was like Meta, did they scare you away from this? And the answer was like, no, like we pivoted because as a startup, we were not in position to win on productivity. Like basically we took a step back and we were like, this is a super exciting use case. Like we do believe that people are going to use headsets to fundamentally transform how they collaborate. But like as a startup, you can basically only work on something that you believe is like 18 to 24 months out of like super, super serious growth. Otherwise, like we just aren't going to survive long enough to do this. Now, if you tell me, do I think that there are going to be like millions of people seriously working every day in headsets in the next 18 to 24 months, I'm kind of like, I don't know if I buy that. But Meta can have a much longer time horizon, right? Like they can really work on this for years, whereas we can work on this for like 1 to 2 years. So it made sense for this to be a thing that like they tackle, or it makes sense for it to be a thing that startups can tackle, but in a much more niche way. Like we couldn't be the next Zoom. If we really wanted to survive, like we would have had to be like, maybe a really niche design tool that's focused on a certain kind of 3D design or something like that. So unsurprisingly, like the startups that are doing well in this space are like Gravity Sketch or Nanome, which is focused on like 3D collaboration in medical or 3D, or 3D collaboration specifically for like product. And that's a lot more niche than what we're going for, right? Like we've had 2 million users, more than 2 million users in Spatial over the last 12 months focusing on creators. We could never hit that scale focusing on productivity. So we kind of like we split into like product focused direction from Meta in that sense, where like they were like, okay, we're going to focus on productivity, we're going to focus on creators. And then I think we've continued to be on different paths from Horizon Worlds. So Horizon Worlds, I think I think they're figuring out their path. Like, this is just my like,
this is your
opinion on the sidelines. Like, I think that they probably are most interested in something like Rec Room because it's like a pretty safe world. It's like fun. I think they're like somewhere between VR chat and like Rec Room right now. I think that like it's challenging because like VR chat is very unfiltered and you can kind of do a lot of things in VR chat. But like it can be a pretty weird place for people. Like you really have to like, people can go into VR chat and have like amazing experiences, and people can go in VR chat and be like harassed and, like have like racist stuff happen. And it's like, it's both the beauty and the terror of VR chat, which is like, it's kind of like it's like a 1994, 95 chat room, but like in VR. It's like also anything can happen there. And like Rec Room, I think is much more controlled. And it's like, much more like with Rec Room, it's like they figured out a couple of games that were really fun. And then they were sort of like, okay, community, like go build worlds on top of this. A lot of the worlds are similar to what already exists. And I mean, like some weird stuff can happen in Rec Room, but for the most part, like that is an experience that like I've been in and I've been like, okay, it's like pretty safe. The avatars are pretty normal. Like you play some pretty fun games. And I think like Meta is trying to figure out some path there where like I think they want creators to come in and build like really dope experiences. I think they probably have learned the lesson we learned, which is like if you're just headset first, you're going to have real problems with scale. And if you have problems with scale, that's not very attractive to creators. And so we weren't surprised that they announced that they were going to web because it makes a ton of sense. Like, I mean, like
you got to go to where the
can
people
access
are.
web. Billions of people in the world can access web. So like it makes a ton of sense to like empower creators to reach an audience that's that big. I think the other elephant in the room is also like mobile and console games. Like that's where I think Rec Room has found a ton of scale. Like I think they have a lot of users on VR, but they also have a ton of users on consoles, on phone. So I think like all of this is to say, and I think our CEO Anand got quoted in like Wired this morning, like for us, like we think the metaverse over time, like people will migrate to headset because they'll already be playing games in it and be able to have like a better social experience there. But our strong POV is nowadays it doesn't start in the headset. Like nowadays it 100% has to start in web and mobile because that's where the audience is. And if you're trying to convince a creator to dedicate or a dev to dedicate all this time to building a world, like they need to have an audience that they could reach. I'm going to pause, but there's something I want to talk about. You did talk about something that is also really interesting, which I think is a very hot topic right now, which is what is a game? I think like this is a really big thing that merits talking about right now because like it's very clear like when I'm shooting people in Fortnite or playing Fortnite, like that's a game, right? Like if I'm playing paintball in Rec Room, that's a game. When you're in Spatial, it's very clearly like not a game, right? And then there's something in the middle. And I think like our philosophy is we want to take interactions from games that are like easily templatized and enable people to have more fun and deep social interactions using things that feel gamified without spatial being a game. So what I mean by that is like, it is unlikely that like you're going to build a first person shooter in spatial. But like in Fortnite, one of the things people love doing the most is like dancing or experimenting with fashion and things like that. So these are gamified aspects of Fortnite that aren't restricted to an outright game where there's a competition and you're scoring points or something like that. So I think that's where a lot of our experimentation is figuring out these like gamified interactions that people really enjoy doing. I've sometimes called it like social fidgeting, which is like when you're talking to people and you get bored, like what is stuff you can do that just sort of like keeps the flow going in a fun way without it being an outright game. Because like a lot of people don't want to play games. Like they just want to talk or hang out and do other things.
It's
But
nice
this
to
is
have an
like
activity to commune over.
You put that beautifully. Exactly. And I think that like communing, gathering is really weird. It's like an awkward thing. Like it takes a lot of trust, and a lot of like social norms and a lot of like common symbols to like make and rituals. There's someone, it's Bree, who like does a lot of our user research, loves to talk a lot about rituals being really important to like comfortable social interaction. So you need to give people the tools to commune and to build those rituals and to be able to like have fun without it just being like silence and talking. Because if it's just silence and talking, like, think about like school, anytime in school when they've tried to like introduce people to new people, like it often doesn't work because it's just like we're sitting around and it's awkward. And like the best that the teacher could do is like try and give a prompt like, okay, like roses and thorns, or like, who's favorite, what's your favorite,
Icebreaker.
yeah, what's your favorite movie? And like, most of the time, like that stuff is pretty lame. So I think what we're trying to do is like, we're trying to kind of like shift the burden onto like the community organizers and the hosts to like organize their community. And we're just trying to make like naturally fun stuff for people to do where maybe it would be awkward to do that in real life, but in like spatial, it's really fun. So like if all of a sudden people said like, let's have a dance break in real life, like people might feel some kind of way about that because they're like, oh, am I a good dancer? Was this person going to judge me for dancing? But in spatial, like everyone's a dope dancer. Like everyone can instantly do fun stuff. So it's kind of trying to like empower people in that way to be able to have these fun interactions, that don't depend on what they're naturally comfortable doing, that might make it a little bit easier to commune and connect with other people.
That's a key point because I personally have not spent very much time in VR. I just haven't as much time as I spent on the computer. It's like let me not add another rabbit hole there. But there are so many facets of being in VR that are not, obviously it's not real life, but even the silence that might just, be ambiently there that's different than in real life, and not having as many opportunities for just sporadic or organic interaction the way that you would in real life. And that actually you explaining how you all are starting to focus more on these kind of interactive communal rituals and opportunities, that makes a lot more sense, the partnership with ReadyPlayerMe and providing bodies for people in this environment. Because if you're just a floating head, then some of these things may not work in the same way. So can you talk a little bit about the significance of that partnership with ReadyPlayerMe and what you hope that it provides for the opportunity and for the platform to grow?
So shout out to ReadyPlayerMe. Like we love them. I've known Timu for like a weirdly long time. I remember he like came through the Samsung Next office like back in the day when they were like Wolf 3D, and like they had a totally different approach. So there are three things that we were thinking about. So firstly, like originally we only had photorealistic avatars where you had to like take a photo of yourself, it auto generates, and then you kind of have this like fairly okay semi-realistic version of yourself. And there were two things we learned from that. So one is like some people don't want to like be their photorealistic self, and two, some people want like an even easier on-ramp into the metaverse, where they just want to be able to jump in as like, they don't even care. Like they could jump in as like a blob or like, like whatever. And they just want to like get started and then maybe like get into it. So part of where we were coming from is we were trying to facilitate like a much faster onboarding, easier onboard experience for users. The second place we were coming from is that there are people that care like deeply about customizing their identity, and they want to be whatever in the metaverse, and that could be something that's like it could be an escapist fantasy, it could be it could be an aspect of their identity that they have a hard time expressing in like the real world, but it becomes easier to express in the metaverse, and we're unlocking that. And we wanted to give them tools to do that. And like ReadyPlayerMe had just built out a really wonderful tool to do that. And then thirdly, and this goes back to like the open standards piece, like we really did believe that like if people have an identity that they already love, like why force them to start from scratch? And if they create an identity in Spatial that they want to bring somewhere else, like they should be able to do that. Again, like our core belief is like compete on the merit, like not lock in, but like compete just purely on the merit of like facilitating the best experience. And so if RPM is already this like wonderful, means of creating and saving identity, like why not leverage their tool set and enable people to take that identity into Spatial and out of Spatial? And so we had been talking to them forever. And then like everything aligned, both from like a pain point perspective of like what were the things we were trying to solve from a UX perspective and where they were at in terms of like technology. Just like being ready to have like the integration was pretty easy. It worked largely with how Spatial already worked. And it all lined up really nicely. And so we love what they're doing. We love that they're really trying to make this identity accessible and utilizable in all these different metaverses. We were stoked to read about their funding, and we think they have a really impressive shot to be one of the like primary methods that people turn to, the primary means that people turn to customize and capture their identity in the metaverse. And the fact that they're making it so easy to integrate all over is incredible. I will also say that the partnership is also extended to empowering creators and like brands as well. And so like because a lot of like creators or brands like come to Spatial and they're like, we want to facilitate an experience, and we feel like Spatial is just like the most premium, but also the most easy to access with like a really wide audience. Like we also have had some really cool sort of like three-way partnerships where like, a brand can like, like Tommy Hilfiger can create clothing on ReadyPlayerMe and then like bring that into Spatial, or like shout out to, we had like Vogue in Spatial, doing something similar, and like worked with the Fabricant on something similar. So another really cool one is Benefit Cosmetics, really huge cosmetics company, like allowing people to customize their brows and then like bring that into Spatial, and like this club that they made. So it's been very cool to see like it's kind of gone both ways. You had people that have like created in Spatial and then been like, okay, we want to like now start to allow people to customize their identity more, or people that go to RPM and they're like, okay, we want to like customize it, enable our audience to customize their identity with RPM. But like once they customize their identity, like what are they going to do with it? Oh, they can go into Spatial and start hanging out. And that's really awesome.
The thing that's impressive is the genuine synergy that's there, right? Because one thing that I've found working in biz dev is that it can be incredibly challenging. It's like you want to work with these people because you admire what they do, but finding the right opportunities where it's not super lopsided, where it's like, this is really helping you out way more than it's helping us, or it's helping us and it's barely doing anything for you. But to really find something where it's like, yo, boom, 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 everybody here really is winning, and it's value additive. Doesn't need to be equally or one-to-one, but in a much more one-to-one fashion than is often viable in technology. Because I just think so often, it's like kind of the thing to do of like, hey, let's jump on a call, let's see if there are some synergies. And then you get on the call and you're like, I mean, some of these are kind of a stretch, so to really land on something that really unlocks a whole new aspect of the business and the platform is really awesome.
100%. I mean, like I am such a broken record on calls with people because I always just basically talk about the same thing. I'm like, crawl, walk, run. Like that is how I basically believe in structuring pretty much like every partnership. And then the other dimension of it is like there's like a very hands-on partnership, and then there should also be like a very like self-service partnership. So, and a lot of times it's like not very clear like which bucket it should fit into, because like you're getting to know each other. Like you don't really, it takes time to figure out. Like you don't get married after the first date, I think. I mean, maybe in some cultures, but like, like ideally, like you want to get to know each other and then kind of figure out if this fits on some level, and then you can, get deeper with one another. So this is where I'm like, my recommendation is always like before you dedicate any engineering or product time to a partnership, like always just test, like do a marketing test to see like if the communities like really fit together and sort of like hack the partnership first. The other thing I will also say is like, you always have to make sure that like both sides can bring something to the table, right? Like the thing that we're always about is like, hey, show us like if you at least put forward like a one pager about like what your plan is and like what audience you have, and like show me the proof, like show me that you have the users or the ROI. And I get it. Like I've also been like the newbie with like a product that barely had any users. So it's like, I also understand the hustle. And so I think it's like, but my experience is like partnerships only work if there's something like medium and long term to get out of them. So it's never worth like lying. You just want to be really like honest. Like if you're new, but you think you have something really special to bring to the table, like show us why it's special. Like we don't only partner with people that have 1 million followers. Like we'll partner with you if you have 10 followers, if you're like building something like really amazing. Like there is a really freaking cool thing on Spatial right now. A partnership we have called Galarox, which is super cool. And if you like look at Galarox, if you like look it up like on Twitter, like Renee, he doesn't necessarily have like a ton of followers on like Twitter or like Instagram, but like he came up with such a cool idea. He's like, I'm gonna do like a generative 3D space project where everyone gets something totally unique. And we're like, this is so cool and such a beautiful thing to do. Like, we don't care if like you're not coming with like a huge audience, because your vision and your creativity is so amazing that like we want to co-sign this and promote it. And so I think it's like there has to be a careful balance. Like sometimes it's like, yes, we want sort of a partnership of equals, but sometimes we're really happy to just like stand and support someone who's on the come up if they're just like putting their heart and soul into it and doing something really cool and different. And that, I mean, that's really our ethos. Like we just want to back creators and help people. I've sometimes said that I wish I wish our tagline at Spatial was like where everyone gets discovered, because that is like my goal for Spatial, for this to be like an uplifting platform. No haters allowed, where like everyone's just like co-signing and uplifting one another. And like that is the kind of space that we want to create, and that we think the world needs, because at least our observation is in so many other spaces like other social media platforms, there's this like feeling of competition, and like if I win, someone else has to lose, and like we want to get away from that zero-sum game. And we really want this to be like, no, like let's get into the habit of everyone uplifting one another. In our experience, that's when people have done really well, including ourselves, is when people really approach with like a yes and mindset, and we uplift each other instead of a like, oh, I have to protect my audience because you're going to distract them. And it's like, no, like you help someone out on the come up, it's going to come right back around in ways you don't expect. There really is like a karma to this thing in the creative world. And so it's just like support creators, period, because like there are just always going to be moments when like you need help and they come back and help you. And it's impossible to predict, and it's impossible to know who's going to get big and who's not going to get big. So it's like, find the healthy mix. Like find the low risk partnerships where people, what they're going to bring to the table, but sprinkle in some risk, sprinkle in some spice. Let's get some caliente on there, because you'll be grateful that you did, because those people will really surprise you and come back in ways that you hadn't expected.
Hell yeah, man. Also, just a note, you are an interesting character to have such an engineering and technical background. Not to overly generalize, but a lot of the people I've known who are super technically minded, they're either like really dry and analytical, or they're like the complete opposite, and they're kind of just like an asterisk in the whole equation.
I'm either the most technical growth guy or the least technical engineering guy. Like my background is really strange. Like I got into college as a chemical engineer.
Mm.
So I don't know. I think that like, yeah, like I don't know. I think like if you ask people at Spatial, they'd be like, Jacob doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. Like if you ask one of our engineers and he's like a pain in the ass. But maybe if you talk to like other people we've done partnerships with, they're like, okay, like Jacob seems to like really like get it. So I don't know. I'm somewhere like weirdly in the middle, but like I think it's all really interesting. And I think that like unless you are in a fully mature space where like most of the core infrastructure has already been built, therefore anything you want to do is already possible, like you have to care about the technology, like, or else why be in this space? Like, unless you're super excited about building the next wave of computing, unless you're super excited about empowering people to express their creativity in fundamentally new ways, and unless you're excited about the technology behind that, like if the idea of like WebGL and WebGPU doesn't titillate you, if you don't find cloud rendering to be something that's like super fascinating, if you don't think LOD is something really interesting to play around with, like yeah, you could play in the space that, but you're probably going to end up creating an experience that's either like super basic or that's like unnecessarily complicated that no one knows how to use. So like you kind of have to be in the weeds of the tech right now because that's how you actually like find an audience and facilitate something that's usable. Otherwise, things end up accidentally tearing to one side or the other because you didn't know how to really thread the needle in the right way. And we see that a lot. We see that where like a lot of agencies will be like, well, we want something to look gorgeous, so we're just going to outsource this to someone who says they're going to build us something amazing in Unreal 5. And then they do it. And then they're like, okay, how do we distribute it? And they're like, well, this experience is only usable by like 5 people in the world with like a supercomputer. It take them like an hour to download it. And they're like, oh shit.
Like,
Or
but it has ray tracing.
right, exactly. And it's like, or it's like, oh, or it's like, hey, we want to build something, but like we really care about accessibility. So someone builds something and they're like, wait, this literally looks like Windows 98 graphics. And it's, I mean, there was like something, I remember there was like an article that was like ripping on a movie. I'm not a hater, so I don't want to, I'm not going to
I feel.
But like there was an article a couple months ago that was like ripping on a movie. And I think what happened was like they had some extra budget trying to promote this movie and they like created some like experience on some platform, like in the last couple of weeks, just being like, we're going to throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks. And like this experience got like annihilated because people were like, yeah, like you're giving me like a PlayStation 1 level like avatar. And then the game is like, go explore a maze or something. And it's like, so you have to, if you don't understand realistically like what is possible, then I think there's so much BS in the space that you'll get duped into building something that really isn't, I think, very engaging where people are today. And like you don't want to build something. What I preach is don't build something where the first thing you say about it is that it's innovative. Build something where the first thing that you can say about it is that it's amazing and fun, and that it's innovative should be like the 5th or 6th thing that you say about it, right? Because then otherwise that just means people aren't using it.
Yeah, it's like you wind up making what would have been a tech demo the product, where it's like really you can save that to just be like, yo, this is a demonstration of what we could do, what we can do. Now let's work back and let's start to focus more on the accessibility and the actual fit with people who are going to use it.
Totally. And what I believe, and it's not easy, it's the hard thing, but you can do both. And that's what I always push people. I'm like, do the hard thing and do both and win. Don't do the easy thing and like get one article written up about it and then have 5 people use it. You know, like that for me is not worth it because like no one's going to read that article in the end. And like the way you're really going to impress your boss or the way that you're really going to grow your audience if you're a creator is if you actually reach real human beings. So let's like partner on that and reaching real human beings instead of like always arguing about the art of the possible and imagine what this could be in 5 years. It's like, yeah, it's not hard to imagine what this could be in 5 years, but like, no, like, let's not wait that long. Like it's 2022. There's cool shit to do now. Like if you succeed now, then you will for sure succeed 5 years from now. Cause now you're already like, you've caught the wave and you're surfing it. It's the people that, it's the people who like try and catch the wave in the wrong way, right? They buy the really expensive surfboard and they don't really know how to use it. And they're like, just kind of like sitting there or they wipe out. And it's like, yeah, like that's not good for you to wipe out and break your ankle. Like let us teach you how to catch the wave, and then you'll continue catching bigger and bigger waves. You'll figure out how to do that. But if you're going to the extreme and trying to like be the pro on day one, it ain't gonna happen.
Like you said, you say a lot: crawl, walk, run.
Crawl, walk, run. And I learned that from Anand, our CEO. So I can't take full credit. That was like his framework, and I feel like I like internalized it like a beast.
Yeah, no. I mean, that's one of the examples of good leadership is when something that you try to teach or instill, really resonates with somebody and helps them along the way. So I'm being mindful of the time, and I don't want to keep you here too long. But one thing I did want to get your thought on is, given the focus that Spatial pivoted to over the last few years on creators, when I think of Spatial, I think of visual art. Now, I've spent a lot of time in the last few months really diving deeper into the whole music aspect of Web3. I have this crazy long video on the whole state of music NFTs. So I'm curious your thoughts on what Spatial can do, or what y'all are planning on doing to make it a platform that is better or more ideal for artists that don't just deal in the visual arts, but also audio, music, that sort of thing, and even maybe something that facilitates Metastar performances and all of that.
For sure. So, I mean, this is a thing we should figure out together. So I'll tell you how we think about it, but also like you're creating music yourself. So like tell me what you need, and like we want to make it happen. So first there's like what we've already done. And so for example, like we've had like the amazing producer Illmind, who's produced for like Ye and Drake and some like really, prolific artists. He has done something amazing. So he's basically created the Blap House in Spatial, and like he basically created a token gated community where you have to like buy his token, and then if you do, like you can come into the Blap House and he will like literally like help you like teach you and like give feedback on like what you're producing. And so he's like built this amazing community of like creators where they come into the metaverse and they come into this like sick house that he's created. And they meet up in Spatial, and like using like our, with our screen share, you can share audio. And so he could literally like share his deck and what you're seeing on his screen, and with like crystal clear audio, and he meets up and shares music that way. Additionally, people have also been like very into doing like concerts and parties in Spatial. So like Dope Stilo, for example, has been like really prolific with Mackie and their whole crew of just doing like tons of concerts. Also like mixing the physical and the virtual. So like he'll like do a concert in real life and then stream that and use screen share and bring it into Spatial, so people could be like dancing in Spatial. But then he'll also be like singing and creating music in real life. And that's been a really, really cool use case as well. You could already token gate in Spatial using ETH or Polygon. So for example, if you were an art, like one thing that's been popular, we've been noticing amongst artists, is like people buying like music as NFTs, or having like fractional ownership of like something that's created by an artist. And that fractional ownership is sort of certified through an NFT. So if you wanted to, like, you could do something in Spatial where you could like sell a song, people could support you through like fractional ownership of it, and then you could token gate like the release of that song in Spatial, where you're like, okay, we're going to play this now for the first time, and then like only people that have the token can come in and have like the listening party. We've been having a lot of requests to scale out performance within Spatial. People are like, I don't want to perform for 50 people. I want to perform for like 500 people, 5,000, 50,000 people. So we are working on on elements of scale right now. So for example, the first thing you're going to see from us, which is like a little bit of alpha, is so we already have this thing called overflow rooms, where if like a room fills up, if you have Spatial Plus, it'll auto generate overflow rooms that people can go into. But the limitation of that right now is that like if you're performing in the main room, that does not get transmitted to the overflow rooms. So we're working on changing that. So for the first thing you're going to see is that you could take a screen share with audio and broadcast that to all the rooms. So if you're like Stilo and you're doing a concert in real life that you want to broadcast across Spatial, you'll be able to do that screen share across, like 5-10 rooms. And so right there, you have like 250, 500 people that could be like amongst groups of 50 people enjoying that performance. And that's really cool. And then We also then want to get to a place where like you can broadcast yourself if you're in spatial across all those spaces as well. So we care a lot about sorry, I'm letting my cat out.
No, you're good.
Yeah. But we care a lot about adding more scale. So I think in the first half, you'll see some of that come this quarter. And then depending on how that goes, you'll see more of that from us in the first half of next year in terms of adding scale. And we definitely like it. It is because we're seeing really cool growth from the community of musical artists, not just visual artists. So like visual artists can kind of do what they want to do in spatial. Now we're adding dope stuff that's going to help both visual and musical artists as well. Like we're, adding deeper support for Unity. So you're going to be able to create like really interactive spaces, higher visual fidelity. Like you're going to be able to take your performances and your concerts to the next level. And that's going to help our visual creators and our musical creators. And like, as we always try and do in spatial, we want to like get people like hooked up and collabing because like visual creators are going to help our musical creators like host even crazier shit within spatial and vice versa. So we think that what we're building to enable scale and what we're building to enable even better visual fidelity and interactivity within spatial is just going to make hosting whatever you want to do in spatial, period, way, way, way better. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. 100%.
And I'm not talking like a crazy timeline for this. Like that screen share scale across the overflow rooms, we're hoping to push out this quarter. And it's like looking positive. So like stay tuned for that, hold us accountable, and like keep banging on the door for what you need, because like literally our process is like we straight up just like look at what people are asking for, and like we like quantify that. So like be the squeaky wheel, like be loud and like ask for what you want. We're always listening. Like truly, like we just build what our community wants and needs. So let us know. And that's is there anything that you've had in the back of your mind where you're like, oh, I would love to do this in spatial that we don't support yet, that isn't on our roadmap?
To be frank, I mean, I'm still not super far along with developing how I want to kind of do my rollout of all of my creative work, because everything I've done in this space so far has been like purely investing or educating. And so I'm still in kind of the early stages of it. But what I've seen is dope is like these different siloed areas, right? So I look at platforms like what My Pet Hooligan is built on, which is something called Interloop, where they allow the animation of the avatars directly, and it's built in Unreal. And then obviously some of the stuff that Improbable has worked on. So like you said, there's so many different things happening in parallel across the space. But I do think that y'all are kind of leading the pack in just one, community and user base, but two, that ease of jumping in where I could literally shoot a link to my grandma and she could pull that junk up on her phone and not have any hurdles getting in or any of that. So I think, as you said earlier, there's trade-offs with all the approaches, but y'all already have more features set that does cater to artists than I was aware of. So yeah, your formula so far has been working.
Dude, I appreciate it. And yeah, and like keep pushing us. I want to learn more about Interloop. I hadn't heard of them, but keep pushing me and us on the features you need. And like for sure, like the stuff that Improbable is doing is sick, and we've like known them for a while as well. I think like it's still going to be some time before that's like perfected and like ready for showtime, but they're making like incredible progress. And definitely like that type of scale. All I can say, this is like now deeper into our R&D, but like all I can say is like we're definitely working on some stuff around that type of stuff. But the thing with us is like we really only want to launch stuff if we think it's like really tried and true and like really scalable. And so my gut is like that type of like huge scale might be more of like a 2024 thing or like a late 2023 thing, just because like it's like when we talk about scalability, we're talking about that it'll work for everyone, but we're also talking about like cost scalability. Like there are the early stages of technology out there that are going to take stuff to the next level, like cloud rendering, but it's so expensive right now to like spin up GPUs to like cloud render. Now, for those that don't know that are like listening, right? Like cloud rendering basically says like, okay, your device doesn't have a lot of computing power, but you're going to be able to spin up a really powerful amount of computing power in the cloud. It's going to stream what you want to see, basically like a video. And then you're going to, the latency is low enough that you can essentially like play the experience, even though the actual most of the compute is being done at a server somewhere nearby. And it's an amazingly powerful technology, but it's super expensive right now to spin up, right? And I mean, like, Google just wound down Stadia. Like, I
Stadia,
think people
yeah.
are still like figuring out like how to make this work at scale because it is expensive. I don't know if that's like why they wound it down, but it wouldn't be crazy to me if that was like part of it, just because it's like so expensive that to really make it sustainable, you have to get a ton of people using it and paying. Like, you either need a small number of users that are paying a lot or a lot of users that are paying something. And so right now, like, the economics of it don't quite work. But trust us when we say, like, we are always experimenting and on the cutting edge of looking at those technologies. And the second it becomes truly scalable, we're going to launch it in spatial for sure and hold us accountable to that.
Hell yeah. Well, Jacob, this was a lovely conversation, man. We touched on a lot of stuff that I didn't even anticipate, but it was great. Any last thoughts you want to leave the people with before we get out of here?
My last thoughts, Sae'Von, are that you're dope. This was an incredibly enjoyable conversation. I think that, I'll say that you did a really beautiful job, I think, of just like talking about stuff that I think is cool and interesting. So thank you for this just being fun. And I'm happy I didn't have to make this like a spatial infomercial. But like for the audience, just like spatial's free to use. If you want to start playing around with it, just go to spatial.io. If you want to create something, you can start creating your own space in spatial on your own. If you want to just see what the experiences are, we have like a really dynamic explore tab. People can go live in spatial once a day. So that's basically like a signal to people like, yo, we're doing stuff in spatial right now, come hang. So definitely play around with the stuff that's live if you want to, like, if you want to find a metaverse that's like where there are people doing stuff, for sure. Jump into the spaces that have the live designation, and you'll have a really good time. And otherwise, like, we're here to support creators. So like, tweet at us, hop in our Discord. Like, the phone is always on to talk to us. So let us know what's working, what's not working, and kick our ass to make sure we keep building something that's good for everyone. Because that's all we want. Give us the nastiest feedback. We love it.
My God, this is awesome. Thank you again, Jacob. And there'll be the links to everything that Jacob mentioned in terms of getting in contact in the show notes. And I look forward to the next one, man. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Peace and love to you and your audience. Hit me up anytime. I'm Spatial JLo on Twitter. And nothing but love. And let's keep building incredible experiences and supporting creators.
Peace.
Peace and love.
You niggas ain't cheat me to reenact the TV. I'm a real life shot caller. You niggas just shoot at the breeze. I can shoot at your